Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of The Week Ahead. The legislature is in at least 4 days and maybe 5 days, and the possibility exists for double sessions. It'll be a busy week. They're going to be debating a lot of divided reports and working in between committees that still have some work to do, and then possible, like I said, double sessions. In the meantime, minimum wage continues to be tabled in the Senate. The citizens-initiated question is tabled in there, awaiting the Senate discussion. In the House on Thursday, they did defeat Representative Sue Austin's amendment to LD 674, which would have, again, created a competing measure. It was sort of a second bite at the apple. Losing in the House was not unexpected. That bill is probably on the Senate calendar today. I would urge all of you to contact legislators and urge them to support the competing measure. I know some members may be hearing from legislators that not to worry about the tip credit in particular, that if this passes in November, we'll come back next year and fix it. That is very difficult to swallow. It is highly unlikely that legislators would decide to overwrite the will of the people, if you will. And also, there's no promise that the legislature will be interested in fixing this issue. So I would not, if you're a business, if you're a restaurant, you're concerned about that issue, please don't take that as a reasonable answer or expectation. If this bill is so flawed, if this proposal is so flawed that legislators are saying, if it passes, we'll come back in the next session and fix it, then they need to look at a more viable alternative, and that viable alternative is the competing measure that we've put forth. So, continue to call your locally elected officials, urge them to support the competing measure. Okay?
As Peter said, most committees are finishing up their work. One committee that is in this week is Energy and Utilities Committee. They have a couple bills. They'll continue to work through the solar legislation. They also have a new bill that will be a public hearing on this afternoon. It's LD 1678. This is an important piece of legislation for our biomass industry here in the state of Maine, and it has to do with some contracting of the biomass electricity. There will be a public hearing this afternoon, and we'll be present for that. A couple other bills that are important that are making their way through the legislative process that we are following. 1578, the solid waste legislation that really has whittled itself down to just product stewardship on batteries here in the state of Maine. And that bill, our retail community, we still have some grave concerns with that piece of legislation. It did come out of committee as a not-to-pass report, but creating another product in our product stewardship and putting the burden on our retail community. As a Chamber of Commerce, we have some concerns. Also, the education legislation, reforming our proficiency-based system and looking at the timing of that process is also going through a legislative process now as they head into double sessions over the next few weeks. So that's what's going on in those issues.
Linda's not here this morning, but she has a bill up tomorrow in the Taxation Committee, and it deals with the collection of sales tax. As I understand it currently, there are times when businesses, for one reason or another, fail to collect a proper level of sales tax on a product. Sometimes this is completely unintentional. It could be an error in terms of how the equipment collects the tax or brings in the tax. Sometimes it's purposeful. The purpose of the bill that's being heard tomorrow on tax would be in those instances in which tax is improperly collected, the business owned sales tax is improperly collected. The business owner or the company CEO could actually be held personally liable for the failure to collect the tax and responsible for paying the sales tax. Obviously, we have some concerns with this. I know Linda worked last week with people to highlight the fact that this is a very anti-business proposal. It's my understanding, based on the conversation she had with our One Voice folks this morning, that there will be an amendment that comes in that basically says if a business purposely fails to collect taxes, in other words, it's a planned thing, then there is some liability at hand. I know that Linda plans to be at the public hearing tomorrow and testifying. We will keep you up to date on the progress of this bill, and we will have Linda do an update, perhaps later in the week through a chamber minute on how that public hearing worked out and what the actual language of the amendment is. So that's what's happening this week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll hope to talk to you next week.
Stay classy, man.